Hi, I'm Bart Hanson. I'm the owner and operator of CrushLivePoker.com. The following hand comes from our call-in show that we record at 4:45 p.m. Pacific Time every Monday. If you want to call in your hand, check out the phone number in the description.
Okay, so to get to the hand, basically a couple of field limpers to me, and I'm on the button with 10 jack of clubs.
Okay.
And my standard open in that situation would be 13, and that's what I opened for. And the small blind called, who's the main villain in the hand, as well as the two field limpers as well.
So you're going to see this four ways. Let me ask you this question. So if it just gets folded to you, what do you open to? Like with no limpers, what do you usually open to? What's the normal straight open in this game?
Probably 10.
Okay. Because I just usually add like a big blind per limp. So if you're opening to 10, I mean, go 14, something like that. The other thing, too, is just that I would be very careful here. Again, as I'm doing my 5-5 challenge, and I've put in about 30 hours at the bike, you got to notice the stack sizes of the limpers here, too. If there's a couple of really short players here, like maybe they've got like 100, less than 50 big blinds, I might over limp this hand. Because, again, you just get into some really, really weird spots. There's always people at this level always like to limp re-raise, too. You always have to think about that. Now, there's not going to be much three-betting, but you're on the button. So it's a little bit different than if it was like limp, and you were like, say, in mid-position or the hijack where you want to raise and you're going to get position over the field. You're on the button. So you can actually over-limp this hand if the... if the limpers were sort of short. I always say, like, if there's two or more limpers, I don't really isolate except with maybe like my early position opening range. And I do open jack 10 of clubs, but I might over limp here depending on what those. It's not an automatic raise,
Yeah, I hear you, and that's good advice. And what would you consider short?
At 1-2, probably like less than 100, I would say. Or maybe I'm trying to think like in my 5-5 game, I would consider short maybe like 200 or less. So maybe 40%, maybe 80 or less, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. And I think in this case, they both had over $100 in front of them. But
okay.
That's not something I would normally be that in tune to. It would depend on the players too, you know. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I opened for 13. The small blind calls and the two limpers call, and it's a small blind who's really the main villain, and he's been running good. I hadn't played with him before, but he certainly seemed competent. He had doubled up early.
Okay.
Has been kind of nursing that stack, and it's 1-2. So if you've got $700, $800, $900 in front of you, you're doing pretty well.
Right.
Depending on how long they've been sitting at the session. So the flop is pretty good. So it's $52 to the flop, and the flop is a 10 of spades, 10 of diamonds, queen of clubs. And the two original limpers check to me, and I bet 20. Again, because I'm thinking of like what's going to call here, right? So
well, here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. So you flop trip tens, right? You've got jack 10.
Yeah.
And it comes out 10 of spades. What was it? 10 of spades, 10 of clubs, queen of clubs, or no?
10 of spades. So it's not suited, So it's 10 of spades, 10 of diamonds, queen of clubs.
Okay. So I'm actually going to mention this a little bit on the podcast here today, too. Now I get to check to you and you bet 20. This is the same type of thing as if you were to flop trips out of the blinds, because there's a lot of limp pots, like even at 5-5. And I think there's a difference between flopping trips when there's a high card out there and then when there isn't. So this board is different than, say, like 10-10 deuce. Like, if we had, like, some random 10 in the big blind and the board came out 10-10 deuce and it's, like, 6 ways and we have jack 10, if you lead out there into the field, it's really tough for people to call, like, unless they're really bad because, what are they going to call with a deuce? But if it's queen 10-10, they certainly will call with top pair. So this is a better board for you to bet. I would probably go a little bit larger than 20. I might just bet 25 or 30. There's all kinds of straight draws out there too. I mean, this is a connected board where people will likely have top pair in a raised pot. So I would size up here. Now, if it had come up like 10-10 deuce, rainbow, yeah, you could bet like 15 or 20. You see what I'm saying? See, there's just a subtle difference.
Right. No, definitely. And then that was definitely in my mind when the I may have checked this if the queen hadn't been on the board,
Okay. So you bet 50. Excuse me, you bet 20.
I bet 20, and only the small blind calls, and I feel pretty good about my hand at this point, right?
Well, I mean,
So
you have to
it's
just you have to recognize that that is a much stronger call than somebody completing the action, right? Small blind is calling next to act, is going to be out of position from throughout the entire
correct.
hand, so should be,
Yeah.
some sort of strong hand. So everyone else folds.
So everybody else folds, right? So
Okay.
now it's heads up to the turn, so
Yep.
about $90 or a little more in the in the pot,
Yep.
and the turn is an 8 of diamonds. So not the scariest card for me, but obviously it brings in certain straight possibilities and things like that, right?
Well, it brings in Jack 9, but you have one of the jacks,
Hmm.
obviously,
Correct.
in your hand. I mean, you've got the Jack of clubs, in your hand. So there's only three combinations of suited Jack 9s, but, at low levels, people might play Jack 9 offsuit. He could still have a queen.
Yep.
A hand like Queen Jack has now got a straight draw. Queen 9 now has a straight draw. Backdoor diamonds look like they've appeared now, too. And, of course, he could have a 10, but I would probably continue to bet here. I mean, if you had a queen in your hand, it would be slightly worse as a bet, but I would still probably bet to bet fold, because that's one of the things that I've adjusted to playing some smaller stakes, is just to continue to betting, because they'll continue to call you. You know what I mean? But if you had
Hmm.
like a hand like ace queen, it's worse for you because the fact that now there's less queens that your opponent can have. But you have a 10,
Right.
so your
And
opponent's more likely to have
right.
other hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So again, I'm thinking about sizing here, and I get what you're saying about the flop bet could have maybe been a little bit stronger. But with a little over 90 in the pot, I bet 75. So and the small blind does call. But what do you think about the sizing, given as played?
Yeah, I mean, I think
What
that's
do you think
fine.
of that?
I mean that you sort of started with a small bet, now you're betting like two
Hmm.
thirds. So you guys started 450 effective, so you still have over 400 left going into the turn. So you got to get some money in there too. So you bet 75, and any calls?
And he calls, right?
Okay, so
Yeah,
now the
and
pot is what?
no,
Pot is 242 now, which is I'm sure is probably a pretty big pot for the games that you guys play at 1-2, and you guys have like what, 350 or so left in your stack, something like that.
yeah. Well, he has me covered,
Right.
right? So
350 effective.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got. I think it's 232, and I think that I think I have about. That sounds about right. Right.
Okay.
So I started with about 450 in my stack.
Right. So you got
So
Jack 10 on the button, raise
yep.
over a couple limper, small blind calls, the limper calls, two limpers call, 10-10 queen rainbow, check to you, you bet 20, small blind calls, everyone folds, turns the 8 of diamonds, puts a backdoor diamond draw out there, check, you bet
Right.
75, and the small blind calls again. Okay.
Right. And so it comes to the river, and the river's a brick. The river's the 3 of hearts.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the small blind checks again. And I got to tell you, I think you do a great service. I think the site's great, and I enjoy being a subscriber. And the thing that I've taken away, and I think it's really helped my game, is even if I lose, I'm going to bet the value, right? Because I think long term, I'm better off betting for value than checking to showdown.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing that I
Yeah.
say, and I've said this, in some articles, and I've said this in some tips, and for you guys that are listening in the live stream or on the podcast, and you're new to the site, you have to have some variance in your river value betting. Now, what that means is that if you never bet for value on the river and get called by a better hand, then you're not betting thinly enough. And the reason why that is because if you're betting for value and when you're called, you're always good, then you must be checking back way too much, right? Because if you
Right.
bet for value and you get called and you're good, say like 70% of the time, that's going to be a profitable bet. But that means that 30% of the time you're going to have the losing hand. But people that bet for value and when they're called, they're always good. That means that like when they're betting for value, they're like good 100% of the time, and they're checking that times between the 70 and the 100. Do you see what I'm saying? And they're losing value in
Oh yeah,
between.
definitely.
They're losing value in
Yeah. No,
between.
no, definitely. Yeah.
So you
So
do have to. I mean, I
so
don't think that this is even that thin of a spot, because I feel like this guy's going to have a lot of queens here. Now, I might not go buck
mhm.
crazy, but I would bet an amount here that maybe gets called by like a hand like king, queen, ace, queen, or queen, jack. I mean, people have a hard time folding. He might think you have ace, king. So I might bet like 75, to 100, something
Yeah.
like that here at the end.
Well, that makes me feel like I played the hand decently. I actually bet 85 into that pot, which is a little more, I think, than about a third of the pot, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And he, and it was funny because he thinks for a minute and he says, "Oh, I know you're milking me," and he actually had King 10. So so obviously I lose the hand, but again, I just kind of in calling in, just trying to get like another person's read on, did I play the hand correctly? And I agree with what you're saying about if you're not losing sometimes when you're betting for value, then you're not betting for value enough.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about this guy having a 10. Like, you would think there has to be a pretty high frequency that he's going to raise with a 10. Here, I mean, when you look at, so let's look at the range of hands that he has on the turn. Calls the flop and then calls the turn, right? It's going to be queens. That's going to be probably like the way that he plays a single pair of queens 100% of the time, right? Okay. Now, if he has a 10 or he has Jack 9, he's going to raise the turn, or with the 10 has already have raised the flop to some frequency. You know what I mean? Like, and usually guys aren't just going to check call with a King 10 on the turn when the board sort of gets wet. So, I mean, I think you just got a little bit unlucky that he sort of played it defensively. But, if he raises off a 10 or Jack 9, say 80 or 90% of the time on the turn or by the turn, then you just got unlucky that this was like the 20% of the time that he didn't. But if he has a queen, he's going to play it like this 100% of the time. Do you see what I'm saying? As a call on flop and a call on turn. So you can't be scared to bet with your 10. And obviously, like I said, you do block Jack 9. Occasionally, a 10 with a better kicker is better because you might run into like someone with the same hand or King 10. But I definitely think this is a bet for sure.
Okay. And if he had come over the top, what would your thinking be?
On the turn or on the river?
On the river. If I had bet I think I left about 200.
Oh, I think it's an easy fold on the river. Easy fold.
Yeah.
Usually, if he like comes over the top as a check raise on the river, he most likely is super nutted in his mind, which is like he's got probably Queen 10. Queen 10 or 8-10. I don't even think Jack 9 takes that line. I think Jack 9 starts to probably like raises on turn. Because, again, it's sort of a wet board, right? There are backdoor diamonds. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the other thing, too. I'm going to be putting out a tip, and I continuously put out these tips that, like, actually, let me pull it up here for a second because I have it written out. But it's basically, because I was actually making these tips, it's a contradiction in logic to not bet for value on the river, scared to open up the action when your opponents have almost a null river bluffing frequency on the river. So you just can't, it's a free roll bet. You have to take the value. You can't be scared of opening the betting up when you're betting thinly at the end in position. And until that changes, even at the higher stakes, you just don't see much river check raise. Now, when you start getting up to 10, 20 plus, you have to take certain things into consideration, that people will sometimes have a river check raise bluff range. But I mean, at 5-10 and below, I can count the number of times, like on one hand, that I've seen it. So,
yeah, no, I appreciate it. Okay, Bart. Well, listen, I really appreciate the call.
All right, thanks for the call. Hey guys, if you like what you've seen here, please click on the subscribe button, and you'll get notified every time we put up a new video. And if you want to check out CrushLivePoker.com for the first month free, use the code YTA200. Click on the link right there.